Hi, this is Starkey Sowers. Welcome again to another Plus Program training series. Today's topic is mushroom wisdom, and this is part one. So you might be thinking, wow, mushrooms, I know a lot about mushrooms. I eat them all the time, whatever the case might be. So ultimately, I think you're going to actually learn a little bit of something this time when we actually talk and look at mushrooms. Ultimately, a unique thing about mushrooms is this. They actually are considered a fungus. We typically classify them as a vegetable here in the United States and other food systems, but ultimately it's actually a fungus. So what does that mean? So there was what is known as mycelia. Mycelia is actually the network of the fungus for a mushroom, and what it does is it literally grows below the surface of the ground. So when it comes to your yard or maybe out in the forest, this mycelia literally stretches out for miles and acres all over the place. So what's neat about this mycelia is a couple different things. Number one, it grabs nutrients and actually can transport nutrients around to different entities. The other thing it does is it actually biotransforms toxic substances into substances that are non-toxic and actually makes them actually food for the forest and or your lawn, so to speak. All right, so the mycelia is actually really pretty unique. It's actually, as we were saying, considered the internet, so to speak, of the forest system. All right, so with that said, when we look at mushrooms, ultimately a couple unique things, because they're grabbing so many nutrients out of the ground, they're very high in nutrients. First of all, they're high in proteins. They're high in B1, vitamin B2, vitamin B3, biotin, as well as folic acid. They've also got some great minerals, typically selenium, as well as iron. Calcium, phosphorus, and potassium seem to be some of the nutrients that typically are found in mushrooms. So it definitely makes it not only a nutritious food, but it also necessarily makes it a food that's very unique, and that it's actually kind of a vegetable system that's growing all the time. All right, also remember one thing about mushrooms, it's a very primitive food. It's been around for years. Hunters and gatherers have collected it and consumed it forever. All right, with that said, let's look at the next slide. We're going to look at what's typical mushrooms here in the United States. First of all, the button mushroom family is what's most typical here in the United States. And the button mushroom family is typically the pizza mushroom, as we commonly call it. Three particular ones that are in this family. Number one, the white mushroom. Number two, the crimini mushroom, as well as the portobello mushroom. So what's unique about those is they're all kind of in the same family or the same genre, so to speak. And so when you look at the white mushroom, it's kind of the cream texture color, so to speak. It's a little bit light on flavor. It's not really robust. And then when we look at the crimini, which is basically almost like the same as the white, but it's got maybe some reddish brown tints to it. It's a little bit stronger in flavor, a little bit more like of a meaty flavor. And finally, the portobellos, which literally are about 8 inches big at times. Those things are definitely our densely packed mushrooms. And you got to cook those things right. But oftentimes these things can literally be used kind of as a meat substitute or as a hamburger substitute. You grill them up and use them literally almost like a meat product. It's kind of a fun one to play with for sure. All right, so you might be thinking, well, where in the world do mushrooms come from? As we were saying, particularly mushrooms have been around for centuries and for years of hunters and gatherers, and individuals have used mushrooms and consumed them forever. I actually got the opportunity to go out in the forest and actually do some gathering of mushrooms way back in the day with my grandfather. It was kind of a fun experience. All right, so with that said, one thing that we have to know is mushrooms actually were considered what we call the food of the gods. The Romans, as well as a lot of other different cultures, including the Egyptians, considered that the mushrooms actually were only supposed to be eaten by royalty and individuals of supreme power. One of the thoughts was that mushrooms actually were the superhuman foods. And you actually might think, well, that sounds kind of crazy. Wait until the end. You might want to reconsider your thoughts on that. All right, so when it comes to cultivation, the first individuals that really started cultivating mushrooms aggressively in what we call modern day times was in the 1600s, and it was the Persians in actually Paris, France. Paris, when it was being built, actually excavated a large percentage of their rock as well as their concrete type substances out of the ground, and they burrowed tunnels. And so later on, these tunnels actually became a great foliage growing area for these mushrooms, and Persians actually went in there and actually had all sorts of mushrooms that were growing constantly, the temperature and the humidity and the light, the lack of light being the perfect time for mushrooms to grow. All right, so with that said, in the United States, Pennsylvania actually goes down currently as the capital where mushrooms are being grown here in the United States, making it kind of a unique culture for them. And we actually look at mushrooms. Obviously, cultivation continues as we see it today. So finally, one of the things that we want to do is look at maybe how you want to use mushrooms in your typical diet. So one thing for sure when we look at mushrooms is this. You want to take them, you want to clean them, you want to wash them, and a lot of times you can put them in a spaghetti strainer and like maybe rinse them off, things of that nature. If you get mushrooms that are a little bit dehydrated, you actually can take them, soak them in water for roughly about 30 minutes, and they'll actually kind of rehydrate back and get some plumpness and some body back to them. Another thing to remember about mushrooms, they are a fungus. So if you're an individual that's sensitive to different types of food allergies or funguses or things of that nature, you might want to reconsider or maybe eat a little bit at a time just to see how your body's going to respond to it as well too. So one of the things to remember as well when it comes to mushrooms is obviously they can be cooked in a lot of different ways. One of the greatest ways that's typically done is sauteed up and used either as a side dish or on top of meats and different things of that nature or meat substitutes. Definitely give it a better flavor and a much more bodied flavor, so to speak. My favorite way, believe it or not, is to take some grass-fed butter, saute them up, put them on a grass-fed burger, mash them together. It's definitely a good way to get some mushrooms into the system, getting some fun nutrients as well. So this kind of gives you a little bit of a start about mushrooms. In part 2, we're going to look at medicinal mushrooms and some of their uses as well. This is Starkey Sowers. Thanks again for watching another Plus Program Training Series.